When you get done, end the meeting. I'll
Okay.
leave this computer on.
Perfect.
You should be all good from here, right?
Yep, I can see it all.
I'm gonna go enjoy my peace while all of you guys are in here.
Nice.
We'll tell everybody to come in here.
All right, we'll see. We'll get started. I was gonna give it another minute, but thank you guys all for joining us. Wanted to do something a little bit different, but because we're on Zoom, it's gonna feel just a little bit awkward because when I do it in a live setting, I like going over the physical documents with everybody and kind of going in the classroom setting. But here we go. I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, we have a chat. Good morning, everyone. We will get started shortly. We got that in there. If you guys all have questions, please unmute yourself. You can interrupt me, or we can wait till the end of any particular document. So what we're going to cover today is all of the listing disclosures that are part of a listing contract once you have an agreement with your sellers that are willing to list with you. And so there's more than one way to do this. There's no necessarily right way to do it. There's a lot of ways to do it. And so when you see me kind of go over it with you today, it doesn't mean that you have to do it exactly this way. This is just one of many ways to go over it. There are ways to do it wrong. And as we had the disclosure class yesterday, with the disclosure class that we had yesterday, it's how to fill out the actual document, the Abbott form, and stay out of legal trouble. But we're going to cover more general how to present it to your seller. So let me bring up the forms. And as I bring up the forms, we'll go through that. So here we go. All right. So you already know how to use your zip forms. So I'm not going to go over that. But here's the residential listing agreement, agent visual. So let me just mark all the forms that we're going to cover. And I'm going to save them as a PDF. And then I'll bring them up on the screen for all you guys to look at. And this is, by the way, something you guys can all do on your zip forms. If you ever want to look at them together, you save them as a PDF, you download them to your computer. And once that's done, then you can go back through and pull them all up. And so it's still processing.
Are you on camera now?
Yeah, I'm on camera now. See, I'm up there. I'm up on the screen. Yeah, but they can hear you guys because I am unmuted. So whatever you guys say in the classroom here, they can hear you there. Yeah. Yeah, right. The echo. So look, this form here is the very first form that you guys are all going to see anytime you're doing a document with either a buyer or a seller or any client. And what I want to bring your attention is this is required civil code in California. This is part of California civil code. And it is very simple. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but it is imperative that you get this signed prior to them signing any other documentation. And this agency relationship is just that. It's basically they have agreed to hire you as their real estate agent to provide them services and to help them either buy a home or sell a home. And if you go to the second page of this, one of the things that I've always done at the bottom of every form as I'm going through it, it always says when it was last revised. And I usually make a note of that, like, hey, this form was last revised December of last year. That's the last revision date, which means it's a document that has either been in question or in lawsuit or something that they've updated to keep you out of legal trouble. And it's a 2-page form. Go ahead and sign right here. And I have them sign. And then I go to the second page, and on this one, it actually says Civil Code 2079.13. And I don't spend a lot of time on it, but this is the actual civil code in California. And I spend a little bit of time just telling them that so that they understand it. And again, you can do this any way that you like, but I think that that's a very good way to present that form to them. And we're going to go back into zip forms. I'm going to bring up the next document. And I'm going to keep going back and forth because there's other ways to do it, but you guys know that this is one of them. So the next one we're going to cover is the agent visual inspection. We covered this in detail yesterday with Brand as we were doing our training on it. So I don't want to kill a dead horse or beat up a dead horse with it again. But this agent visual inspection is, again, right at the top. It says California Civil Code right here. And this is part of that civil code in California where you got to make sure that you're doing this document. This is the only document that you have as a real estate agent that is to protect you and to protect your client. It is the only one that is being done by you for you. Everything else is being filled out by the seller, not by you. And so this is for use by an agent when transfer disclosure statement is required or when a seller is exempt from completing a TDS. So basically that's all residential transactions in California. We recommend and we require as a company that you do this agent visual inspection. I always, again, tell them when it's been revised. You can see right here at the top of the screen. Last revision date was June of 24. That was just about a year ago, right? And anytime you have a current revision, you got to pay attention to that because there may be stuff in there that's changed that you're not aware of if you've been in real estate for a while. What I have my clients do is I turn this around and I have them look at it. And here's what I tell them is my part is because the agent's duty is limited to conducting a reasonably competent and diligent visual inspection and reasonably normal and accessible areas of the property. That's it. I'm not supposed to be flushing toilets. I'm not supposed to be opening. I'm not supposed to be crawling in an attic. I'm not supposed to be going into any crawl spaces. This is simply a visual inspection of stuff that I can see. And there's actually stuff right here like roof and attic. Agent will not climb onto a roof or into an attic. You're not a home inspector. On the interior, an agent will not move or look under or behind furniture, pictures, or wall hangings. You're not expected to know if there's a hole in the wall behind that big poster that they have in the bedroom. That's you're not supposed to know. That's just what you can visually see. And so, as far as how you fill it out, we covered that yesterday. You know, you don't want to be very precise in your description. You don't want to say big crack, small crack. You just want to say there's a crack or cracks exist. A big one is discoloration. This one was pulled up in court once where the judge asked, sorry, I apologize. The attorney for the plaintiffs asked the agent, you said that there was a stain here in the bathroom. Did you try to clean it? And the agent's like, no. Well, how do you know it was a stain? Do you lie on all your documents or just on this one? Because she never tried to clean it and it was a mold situation. So you can see from that that it's not a stain, it's a discoloration. You don't know if it's mold, you don't know if it's not. There's discoloration on the wall in the bathroom. And an attorney that's aggressive can tear you apart. So as you're filling this out, I want you to think of you're in front of a judge, there's a lawsuit happening. How are you going to describe that thing on the wall or what you see? And so again, we don't say big, we don't say small, we don't say stain, we say discoloration. We say this, we don't put nail holes on the wall because they've taken down pictures. How do you know it was a nail? Could have been a thumbtack. You know, it could have been anything else. Could be termite holes. We don't know, right? And so you're just saying holes on the wall, north wall, south wall, east wall, whatever it is. And so when it goes into the entry, we spent a lot of time. That training that we did yesterday, that Robert Brand did for us, told you how to fill this out. So I'm not going to cover much more of that. But on this one, I do have the clients read the bold right here. The undersign is based on reasonably competent and diligent visual inspection of the reasonably normal accessible areas of the property and states the following. There's almost always some kind of wear and tear on the floor, whether it's brick, whether it's linoleum, whether it's wood, especially if it's carpet, there's almost always at the entry going to be some wear and tear. Now, what do most people have at their front door? An entry mat. What do people have inside the front door? A welcome mat inside, a runner, if you will, right, for them to step on. And so if there's a runner, it is not your job to pick up the runner and see what's underneath it, because now you're doing a physical inspection, not a visual inspection. So just put in there what you can see. You guys can't see the room that I'm in, but we have tables up against the wall, and it's created a rubbing point where the paint's been rubbed off the walls. If this was a living room, I would put paint missing where table rubs against the wall. That would be acceptable because I can see that the table's there and it's the perfect height. If the table was missing, I wouldn't put where table is rubbing because that's an assumption. I would put paint is missing about 3.5 feet up the wall where the chair might hit. It could be a chair. So you only want to put what is actually there, and that would probably show up in pictures. Again, as you're filling out this first one, it's page 2 of 3. I always tell them, hey, this is page 2, initial here. I go to the next one at the bottom. This is page 3. Then I go on to the next one. But this is the only one that's being filled out by you as a real estate agent. Now let's go to the next one. And I'm deciding to go back and forth because all of you are going to be using zip forms or should be using zip forms. So I just want you to know how to go back and forth. That was your agent visual inspection, training transaction. No. Let me go. Well, this is actually all the combined documents, I think. Let me take a look. Give me 1 second. Oh, there's an error there. All right, let's go to this one. This is the TDS form. This is a really fun form. This form has been around a really long time. So this is a transfer real estate disclosure form. This is, again, civil California code. So this is a law in the state of California. This is civil code. This form was last updated or revised June of last year. And I always turn it to face with the clients and I tell them this is a 3-page form. And on this one, I always have them read this in bold right there. The following are representations made by the seller and are not the representations of the agents. If any of this information is a disclosure and is not intended to be a part of any contract between the buyer and the seller, it is not a contract, it is a disclosure. Oftentimes, though, a lot of people use it as part of the contract, and I'll get into that. So again, this one here, it's 3 pages. On page 1, here's what you got to read. Is the seller is or is not occupying the property? Is it a rental property? Did they inherit the property? What's going on? Are they currently living in it or not? And so if the seller is living in it, then we expect them to know more about the property. If they're not living in it, you want to mark that. And so the way that I describe this to my clients is, hey, look, this is a TDS. It's a mandatory form in California. Even a for sale by owner has to cover this form or a form very similar to it. So the subject property has the items checked below. This is what I tell them. You're only going to mark the boxes if the house has it and if the items are staying. For example, the majority of the homes in the houses that we sell have a stand-alone oven range stove. We consider it a stove, right? It's one piece. But how many of you have been somewhere where it has a cooktop and then separately it has the oven somewhere other on another wall, right? That's also very common. So does it have a range? That's your cooktop. Does it have an oven? Yeah, it could be a standalone unit. So they're going to mark both boxes. Does it have a microwave? Is it a tabletop? Is it a built-in above the stove or not? If it doesn't work, then don't mark it. Even if it's there, but if it doesn't work, don't mark it. And you got to make a notation that it's not currently working. Does it have a dishwasher? Yes. Does it have a trash compactor? Yes. The microwave is one of those where if they have a tabletop one, are you going to leave it or are you going to take it with you? If it's not staying, don't mark it. And so as you're going through all of these, some of the really important ones are the satellite dish. Who owns a satellite dish? Does the sellers own it or is it owned by DirecTV? More than likely it's owned by DirecTV. So you can put in there that it is marked that it has it, and then under other or at the bottom under the descriptions, have them say dish or satellite TV is leased from whatever company. You got to put that in there. The other one that sometimes confuses people is when it says exhaust. Does it have exhaust? So right down here, like exhaust fans, which is in this general area, and does it have an exhaust fan? A lot of laundry rooms have it, and most bathrooms have it. And that's where you're going to put exhaust fans, and you can put where it's at, bathrooms or laundry rooms. And then I have them initial. This is page 1. Here's page 2. Are you the seller aware? And this is the big one. Are you aware of any significant defects, malfunctions in any of the following? Yes or no? And so they're not going to answer yes or no yet until they read the next line. So right now they leave it blank and they're going to say, is there any defects on your interior walls? Well, no. Well, sometimes there is cracks, right? And sometimes we call them settling cracks if they're above the door frame. We don't know if it's settling cracks. We just know that there's cracks in the stucco or cracks in the sheetrock. So again, if there's anything here, they got to mark it. And so if every time they use the microwave, if it pops the breaker, something's not right. And so they might want to say that, like, hey, you know what? No, everything is fine. But when the kids are getting ready and using the hair dryer in the hallway bathroom, and when my wife turns on the dryer in the master bedroom and somebody's doing the microwave, and when we have that much load, sometimes it'll pop. Well, that could be overloaded. That's not something that's going to happen all the time. But that's stuff that they may want to disclose. If they know it's an issue, they got to disclose it. And so again, are you the seller aware of any of the followings? Substance or materials or products which may be hazardous. They're reading it. You're not reading it to them. It's turned their way. They're reading it out loud, and they can ask you questions, but it's stuff that they have to read. I always go to this one. Number 2 is something that I always cover with them. And the reason that I was covered with them was because oftentimes they're going to answer it wrong. So let's read number 2. Number 2 says features of the property that are shared in common with the adjoining landowners, such as walls, fences, and driveways, whose use or responsibility for maintenance may have an effect on the subject property. Almost all of the time that I had done this with clients, the majority of them, unless they have some real estate experience, they almost always put no, there's nothing shared in common. And I always put stop. I said, you live in a tract home or in this neighborhood, and there's fences between you and your neighbors, right? Yeah. So the answer is yes. you do have something shared in common. If the fence were to fall down in a windstorm, would you automatically fix it, or would you approach your neighbor and say, hey, I think we should split the bill? It's our fence together. And so number two is one that I always stopped them and said, this isn't an opportunity for me to kind of go with, you do have something that's shared in common. However, if they're out in the country and they don't have any neighbors, maybe they don't have anything that's shared. But in the majority where we're selling homes in town where they have neighbors with fences, number two is and should always be, or most of the time should be yes. Any encroachments or easements, again, they got to read that. I like what Brand said yesterday, Robert Brand. He said if the neighbors are going to come in once they own the home and are moving in, if they're going to tell them stuff about that property, you better just disclose it. And we have had some honest mistakes by sellers that have cost us a lot of money. And we have some honest mistakes that happen and don't cost any money, but we have sometimes sellers do make mistakes. They're human. And so this is meant as a memory jogger for them to think back for as long as they have owned the home, even prior to them owning the home. If something was disclosed to them as part of the purchase, they should, if it's relevant, disclose it again. So again, any major damage, number 9, to the property of any structures from fire, earthquakes, floods, or landslides. Has anything happened? Stuff happened. Did something flood in the street a couple years back, and now they got damaged. Now they got to report it. So have them read it. Number 16, if the answer to any of these is yes, please explain. Attach additional sheets if necessary. You can start typing in here. And if you go over the space, it'll attach another sheet for you, or you can just type it on another sheet. But this is page 2 of 3. Here's the final one. This is the agent inspection disclosure. Again, you did the Avid separately from this, but you could put in here that you did the Avid. You would mark it here. The Avid form is attached. That was my inspection as a real estate agent. This is yours from the seller. Both of these were going to be provided to any buyers that you get into escrow with. And that is the end of this particular form. This is the real estate transfer disclosure form. Guys, look at the top. This is a civil code. This has to be done regardless of whether they're for sale by owner or not. So if you have a buyer who is buying a for sale by owner property, the seller of that for sale by owner has to do some kind of a TDS. They're available for free online. It is not your job to provide it to them, but it is your job to make them aware that they need to provide it. And I know that we're not talking about representing buyers right now, but if you ever do represent a buyer on a for sale by owner, make sure that they get this, because if not, you can be just as liable for helping them buy a property without receiving full disclosures from the seller.
Is there different forms, say if it's just land?
There is. So on land, it is a very, very different than it is on the residential. But mobile homes are the same as this. It'll say manufactured on the top. Yeah.
On that TDS, and either one would put the date that they did that.
Oh, good. If you want to go back to the TDS, here's some really good stuff. So let me pull it back up. So they just asked me do we put in the date in by saying the answer is you put in more than just the date. So it describes as the following. So they're going to put the date that it was done. There's a lot of stuff that you can fill out in here, but yeah, so you definitely put the date that it was filled out. I like the next one that's coming up. So let me go over the next one. The next one's kind of fun. It's very, very similar. You guys already know what I'm talking about?
SPQ.
The SPQ. So let me pull up the SPQ, Seller Property Questionnaire. So the SPQ is very, very similar to the TDS. The TDS is a California mandated disclosure. The Seller Property Questionnaire is not, but it is one that we mandate as a company to help keep you and your client out of trouble. And so it'll tell you that it is not a substitute for the TDS. You got to do them both. This one was last revised in December of last year. So anybody who's been in real estate for a little while, make sure that you're reading it because it has changed. It changed in December. And on this one here, you're going to have all of the information here. This one, if they are a seller, I have them read section number 2. If they're the buyer, I have them read section number 3. Sometimes they read both. Number 4, I'm going to read to you out loud, is seller awareness. For each statement below, answer the question, are you the seller aware of, by checking either yes or no. A yes answer is appropriate no matter how long ago the item has been asked about or what what documented has been done. Unless otherwise specified, if you say yes, please explain your yes answers underneath. And so the key thing here is, are you the seller aware? Are they aware of it some way, somehow, or do they know about it? And so they're going to go through here is, do they have any reports, disclosures, warranties, or maintenance recommendations, estimates, studies, or surveys that have been done and that they need to provide? So again, any inspections, disclosures, warranty, or maintenance recommendations have been done. If they had a plumber come out because their line was stopped last year, they had to plug it, and they came out and they routed it. And at that time, they said, "Hey, you have a lot of," I can't even think. There's a lot of tree roots in your line, and you should replace it. And that they were told that a year ago. Now they've decided to sell it, and they haven't had any issues since. They were told a year ago that that's required maintenance, right? There should be, cutting out those roots by rootering it at least once a year or whenever they grow back. They should provide that last receipt. It's little things like that that get sellers in trouble and potentially you in trouble, because now the new buyers will go into it and they'll have an issue right after they move in because it'll be springtime or summertime. The roots are back in the line. They have to cover somebody. The neighbor goes and says, "Oh man, the rooter guy was always here last year with the last owners." And all of a sudden you got a lawsuit on your hands. So they really got to think about that, because neighbors will overshare because they want to be everybody's best friend sometimes. So number 6, statutorily or contractually required or related. Are you the seller aware of number 1, or letter A? Everybody knows this one in real estate. Within the last 3 years, the death of an occupant of the property upon the property. Has anybody died in or on the property? Like if somebody has a heart attack, the joke used to be, and it's not, it's a terrible joke, is take them out to the street. If you call 911 and put them out in the street and wait for the ambulance out there, because if they're on the street, you don't have to disclose it. But if they're on the property, you have to disclose it. It's terrible. And I don't know who came up with that, but that's an explanation of it. Or somebody was picked up by an ambulance and they passed on the way to the hospital, then it's not technically in the home, right? But if they died in the home, you have to disclose it. My father-in-law died in his home about 3.5 years ago. So technically we wouldn't have to disclose it, but I think I still would, even though we're slightly over the mark. If we were to sell it, it's been 3.5 years. Well, that's not 4, right? And so that's something where you might have to disclose it. And for some people, that's a big deal. They don't want to buy a home where that has happened inside. They're scared of the ghost or whatever, but it has to be disclosed. There are exceptions when it comes to medical things. If they passed in the home, you have to say they passed in the home, but you don't have to say what they passed from. Unless it was like in the news, if it was a murder or something, that should always be disclosed. Or like a celebrity death will probably be disclosed with that home forever. But if somebody passed, say like what it says here, HIV or AIDS or something, or a drug overdose, medical things should not be disclosed. If somebody
Mike?
died, that's it. Hey, Brad.
Mike,
Yes, sir.
question.
Go for it.
Would a death by an organic bullet be considered a death by natural causes?
Well, it's an organic bullet. I don't even know what you mean by that. Was it a wooden bullet?
If it was some sort of organic bullet, would that be considered a natural cause?
No,
Don't think about it too hard.
It's not natural, because a bullet going through somebody's body is not natural. So, but that's a great question, Brad. But it's one of those where you don't have to disclose that it was an organic bullet, just a death. And then if they're pressuring you for answers, or if it was in the news, then some of those discussions can be had. But just it's simply about 3 years. If it's not been 4 years, like in the case of my father-in-law, you would still have to disclose it. It's not been 4 years. At the 4-year mark, we don't technically have to disclose it, but the neighbors are all going to tell the new owners that he passed in the home. So you might as well disclose it. And is it really going to the right buyer, it's not going to matter. But to some buyers, it's going to matter more than anything. And so just disclose it to be safe. I'll give you a question that is not here and is not in the TDS is we had a seller who had a property for about 15 years, and they had owned it since it was built. They decided to sell it. And when they sold it, everything went through smoothly. Fast forward about a year, and the new owners had decided to put in a pool. While they were in the process of putting in a pool, and this is in a very high-end area in Visalia, the contractor found out there was some cement underneath, several feet under the ground, where a pool had been covered up. And so he then raised his quote a significant amount to remove the old pool, because now he had to spend a lot more time doing that. The buyers sued the sellers and said, "You never told us that there was a pool there." And the sellers said, "Oh my God. My parents," because now these are the kids that had it, but it had been in the family for 50 years. "My parents had a pool when we were young, and they covered it because somebody almost drowned and they got scared and they covered up the pool." That's not a question on the TDS, and it's not a question on the SBQ. Nowhere is there a question that says, "Have you covered up a pool?"
Right.
But it is legally the judge determined that the seller should have known, even though it was 48 years ago that it was covered. 48 years is a long time. Like if you're 55, you were like 8 years old when it was covered, but they lived there and that was a fact. And so the sellers lost. And it was a $40,000 lawsuit that and it was actually like $120,000 lawsuit that it was 40, 40, and 40. Everybody got hit. The agent got hit with 40 grand. The sellers got hit with 40 grand. Somebody else got hit. So everybody, it doesn't seem fair, right? But it should have been disclosed. If they really, because as soon as they brought it up, they remembered, oh shit, yes, there was a pool back there. They didn't remember. They were being honest. They didn't remember, but in court, it didn't matter because it was not disclosed. I still believe to this day that our sellers were being 100% honest, but they were literally kids when it happened. It's already over. I'm just simply giving you an example of things that have happened that we've been a part of. Those are things that through experience, they're not on here. And so guess what I would be doing with all of my sellers that have a house in the back? Hey guys, you guys have owned this house for a really long time. Has anybody covered up a pool in the back? No. Great. And then you're done. But you're only going to make a $40,000 mistake once. And then you're going to ask. And the seller, I mean, they had to pay. And it was expensive. And our part of it was 40 grand. So yeah. That one hurt. The release of an illegal substance or anything. So as you're going through all of these questions, again, this is not you reading it to them. They should be reading it themselves and answering it themselves, but you're there to help them through the process. And one of the things, again, that I always do is at the bottom, this is page 1 of 4, initial here. Let's go on to page 2, any alterations. And as you're going through here, one of the things that I want to caution everybody on the call is if you as a real estate agent are doing flip, or if any of your clients are doing flips and you're representing them, starting about August of last year, there was a brand new California mandate, and it's a law. It's more than a mandate. It's actually a California law that says anybody who does a flip property, even if the intentions was not to flip it, even if your sellers fixed the property knowing that they were going to sell it eventually and they already owned it, so it's not technically a flip, any major work that has been done, they need to save all of the receipts and provide a description of the work that was done along with any official receipts. Now, if they did the work themselves or they hired a handyman that's not a contractor, there's not going to be an official receipt, but they got to give a description. We painted the house inside and outside. We changed the flooring. We changed some of the lighting fixtures. We changed some of these things to get ready to sell it and make it turnkey. That is now part of the law. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of flippers who would buy a property that may or may not have had termites, and then they fix it and they paint it, and now the inspector goes out and the termite guy, and they can't see any notice of any termite infestation because it's all been painted over. And so now they got to know and disclose, hey, we painted everything. That way, if anybody's doing an inspection, they look a little bit harder. They know what's been done. And was it done for the purpose of hiding something, or was it done for the purpose of just getting the property ready to sell? You had a question.
Yeah, so if it's been, I know this is in the last 12 months, or I don't know why that number's coming to mind. So if they did it 5 years ago or 20 years ago, and they forgot about all the work that was done, they don't need to disclose it, that's a question.
It's what they're aware of and remember.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean they can't get sued for it if it's found out later.
What about that 12? I don't know where I read something about the last 12 months. In the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Like even letter D in the past 12 months.
Yeah, any part of the property being painted in the last 12 months. So
it was painted 2 years ago.
So let me give you this. The ceiling is painted. How often do you paint your ceiling?
Oh.
Almost never, right?
Yeah.
If you painted the ceiling, what are they trying to cover?
Oh.
A water stain.
Make mine bright.
So we painted the ceiling to cover the water stain. They're not going to say that, right?
Yeah.
But if somebody sees that the ceiling's been painted, it asks you would start asking questions.
Yeah.
If somebody painted the walls because my daughter's bedroom was pink because she went through her pink teenage years and now she's out of the house in college, and I didn't think anybody wanted a pink bedroom, so we painted it white. That's no big deal, right? And so it is just a disclosure to keep your sellers out of trouble, and so that the buyers are aware that if they need any flags go up based on their experience, that they can say, okay, I better do an inspection. Right. And it's also telling their agent we better do an inspection. So again, as you're going through this, the reality is it is their responsibility as a seller to go through this. But as an experienced real estate agent, as you gain experience, you bring up some of these stories and you share it with them just to see if it drums up any memories. And so again, at the bottom of this one, this is page 2, please initial here. And then they keep going to page 3. Here's the big one for you. It's number 11. Pets, animal, and pest. Past or present pets on the property. If they've had cats and dogs, just put yes. If it's a rental property and 2 tenants ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, they had cats or dogs, just put yes. Property has been a rental property, and in the past, some of the tenants have had pets. Because what happened, and here's the worst one that I've seen with that, is that somebody had really nice carpet done that was about a year or 2 old, and when they went to sell it, it was high-end carpet. They professionally shampooed everything. They moved out of the property, put the property up for sale. They had already bought another one. The new buyer came in, past or present pets on there. The seller put no. They didn't really look at it. It's like, hey, no one's been there. There's been no pets on it for at least a year. We shampooed it. The new people came in. They had bad, severe allergies to a cat, and they had to replace the flooring on about a 2,600 square foot house. It was roughly 1,800 square foot of carpet that had to get replaced because they wanted it all to match, and it was a very expensive mistake on the seller, and the seller ended up paying for that because they didn't want to go through the whole mediation process. So it's one of those where you may not be allergic to a pet, but the family coming in may have severe allergic reactions to it.
Mike,
And yes, Brad.
wanted to make a comment on that, and this
Sure.
is a serious one, and this is what I've been dealing with on is representing sellers and on buyers. I asked this question. I want to know, if possible, whether it's a dog or a cat, and
Yes.
it was indoor, outdoor, or both, because that's where
Yeah.
people have the allergy issue to deal with.
Oh God, I had one person who wanted to replace the top 3 inches of dirt in the backyard because the previous people had a dog that pooped. And they were just like they did not want to use the backyard because they just thought it was gross that a dog had pooped in the backyard at some point. And just because we're mostly normal, doesn't mean that your clients are going to be right. And that one, man, they were my buyers, and I was like, "Are you freaking crazy?" Like in my head, I didn't dare say it out loud. Like they're not going to scoop up the top 3 inches of dirt and replace it, and that's what their request was. I'm like, "That's crazy." I thought to myself, but these things happen in life, and the reality is even if we're not ourselves allergic reaction to dogs or cats, some people just find it gross. I love our cats and I like dogs. I don't find it gross. I don't want to step on poop, but I don't find it gross to where I want to replace the dirt or the carpet, right? But some people might. The big one here is D, particularly with urine as it pertains to cats in particular. Cat urine smell is very, very difficult to get out of. And we have sold houses that were rentals where the bottom baseboards and sometimes the sheetrock had been saturated in the corner where the litter box was at with cat urine, and the people weren't very clean, and it was almost impossible to get that smell out. And eventually, in order to get the property sold, they had to cut out the sheetrock and replace it in that area, and then they painted the entire room, and it finally went away. So those things can happen. Again, this is for the seller to fill out, but through experience, you learn to share these stories, and they're not always fun to share. Vera, go ahead.
Real quick, sort of that instance, would you have to disclose that the sheetrock was cut out to remove?
Oh yeah, oh completely. Yeah, in the master bedroom, the sheetrock was cut out to remove any pet damage or odors that were there, and so yeah, it was a quick disclosure, but it had to be done, and so you had to, because they not only did they paint, they had to put why they painted. This is the last page, page 4 of 4, and as you're going over this, this is these last 2 forms. I mean, the first 3 that we started with, the AVID is the most important form for you as a real estate agent. The TDS is mandatory by state. And this one here's the SPQ are, in my opinion, the 3 most important disclosures that you're going to go over with any of your sellers. And so I'm going to go over number 16 real quick, because my wife and I just sold a property. I guess we closed on it. Wow, I guess it was early this year, but it was one of the rental properties. And it's a property that we fixed. And what we did there is, how many of you have been into those homes that were built in the 80s where you step into the house and it's one level and it has a 10-inch drop into the living room? Well, this was one of those houses. And when we bought it, We didn't like the step down because it's a hazard and we could see kids tripping over it. We just knew that it would be a hazard. So what we did when we bought that house is we had the carpet removed, we drilled holes into the base, we put some rebar in, and we filled it with cement to make it level with the rest of the house. And once it was level, then we had to raise the outlets to the appropriate height because otherwise they were too low to the ground. And we did that, and we had to disclose that at the time of sale that we filled in the 10-inch drop at the living room because it was a step down living room. It might have been 6 inches. I don't know what it was, but whatever the standard step down is, whatever one step is, might be 6 inches. Whatever that was, probably closer to 6 inches. Is we did that and we disclosed it. That is a big deal because if not done properly, that the cement could crack. If you have a raised foundation, that could be an issue. Luckily, this house was a slab built house. But if you have a raised foundation, you're not going to fill it with cement, or if you do, when they crawl in the house, it can't crawl underneath that space. So little things like that have to be disclosed. And so just be aware of it. The other thing that I'm covering in number 16 was not that, but it was rather the neighborhood noise or nuisance. This house directly across the street and down about one block is a fire department from the city of Porterville. So we put that the house was located within half a mile of a fire department where they did that in a training facility. And also part of the city sewer treatment is right behind that fire department. And a lot of people don't know that in Porterville. It's right behind the Target shopping center. And so it's located within half a mile of a city sewage treatment facility, a training facility, and a fire department. And a park, because the park is directly across the street. It was really cool. It was real close to Matching. So we had to disclose all of that. It was a non-issue. But can you imagine if we sold it and all of a sudden there's a fire truck going on and they turn on the sewage thing at night and every night smells like poop and they're like, man, we don't want this. And now there's a skate park across the street. We didn't know. And now they want out and they want to sue us. I mean, little things like that can be a big deal for people. So over disclosing is better than not disclosing. And in my opinion, being across the street or half a block away from a fire truck or a fire engine or a fire department can be a distraction and a nuisance. I mean, I don't want to hear fire trucks all night long. That doesn't mean that they're going off all night long, but they could. It's not a pleasant smell when the sewage is being treated. And so just disclose, right? And so that is one of those things where it's always better to be on the safe side. And some of the people think, because I've had this question come up with sellers, well, I don't want to put in there that it's a nuisance. I don't consider it a nuisance. It doesn't bother me. The fire trucks go off once a month or whatever. Baloney, they're probably going to go off more than once a month. And they're going to see this after they've fallen in love with a house and now they're in escrow. Do you think they haven't driven by the house and not seen that stuff? They probably are aware of it, right? But if you try to hide it, that's where the issues become. And it's not you hiding it as an agent, but rather the sellers are trying to, well, no, I don't really want to tell them. I don't want to scare them into not buying it. No, scare the hell out of them now. Because once they close, you don't want stuff coming back.
You say that it's not a nuisance, but this happens every day.
No, you don't say nuisance. You don't say anything. You simply say it's located within half a mile of a fire department. That's it. Because as Robert Brand said yesterday, dogs barking might not be a nuisance to you because you love your dogs, but the
Right.
people next door might hate their dogs. Maybe they got bit by their dog when they were a kid and they never had a dog ever since and they hate it, right?
So
You don't say whether or not it's nuisance. You simply say, yes, located near fire department. Yes, located near the airport. Yes, located near the freeway. Yes, located near the sewage. Yes, located near a park. Yes, located near a shopping center. Disclose it because then it can't haunt you later, right? And so, again, does anybody have any questions on the TDS, the AVID, or the SPQ? Again, those three documents are the three most important documents of a disclosure part of a contract because it's the ones that can come back and haunt you. It's the ones that you can get sued for. And you gotta remember when your seller gets sued, if they ever got sued, they're really going after the seller, but they're going to name you in it because everybody knows that you pay for errors and omissions insurance. And that's the way that attorneys' brains work. And they're going to go after you. So even though you didn't fill it out, you did provide the document to your sellers. And you do have a responsibility to review the document to make sure that it is complete, to make sure that no boxes are left unchecked. Like if they go through it and they just didn't answer F, G, or H, it's an incomplete document. And so you have a responsibility both to yourself and to your client to review the form. And as you're reviewing the form, you should review some of the questions that people tend to get wrong, such as the fences, the death on the property, things they don't want to disclose. Like they might not think that a fire department is a nuisance. They might not think that at all. Or if they live within a mile of the hospital, you think that ambulances aren't going to the hospital with their sirens going? Could that be considered a nuisance? Absolutely. Right? I don't want to hear ambulances all night. I mean, I do anyways, but
Mike, do
Yeah.
we get added for the road?
So ABIDs are not required on new construction. New construction is one of those things in the state of California that you don't have to provide an ABID on because technically you're just referring them to the builder and the builder is the one responsible for all of their contracts and you just became a referral agent and you're getting a commission back on a referral basis. You're not actually representing your buyer because you're not submitting your contract. Now, there are cases if you're dealing with a builder that's building one or two houses at a time and it's not in a brand new neighborhood where you are submitting it because they have it listed as a regular property. So there are cases like that, but 90% of the time in the area where we do business, we're referring them back to the builder because they're doing entire neighborhoods or what have you. And in those cases, no, because we're just a referral agent. But if they're buying a single custom house that was built one at a time by a builder and you had to do your contact to represent them, in those cases, the answer would be yes. All right, we're going to get out of this one. If nobody has any questions, we're going to go on to the next one. And again, it's just, I wish that I was doing this. Like I literally, I have the papers here. I put them in front of the seller. I turn them around and I've gotten so used to them that like, read this, read this, read this. And I always have them read a couple of things that are in bold and I have them sign it. And I go, this is page 2 of 4, sign here. And we just keep going. The next one is kind of a dumb one in a lot of ways, but it's it's a necessary form. So we're going to cover it here. And this is the water conserving plumbing fixtures and carbon monoxide detector advisory. This was again revised June of last year. And this one, it doesn't say it up here, but it says in the very first line, California law, Civil Code 1101.4 and 1101.5 requires that all single family residences, not apartments, not duplexes, not fourplexes, all single family residences and multi and commercial properties built on or before January 1994. Now I got to take back what I said. So it's all residential properties built after 1994 have to be equipped with water conserving plumbing fixtures. Additionally, residential commercial properties built on or before January 1st that is altered or improved is required or equipped with water conserving plumbing fixtures. What does altered or improved mean? Depends on the city where you live. Now, I will tell you that valley-wide, there is only one township that I know of that actually verifies this. So the state of California is saying you have to conserve water. When you go to Home Depot, Lowe's, or Walmart and you order a new faucet and you buy a new faucet and it gets delivered to you, if it's in California, they're only allowed to sell you water conserving fixtures. So you don't have to worry about it. Everything you're buying now is water conserving. Everything is compliant. However, if you were to sell a house, nobody is enforcing this. So as you go to the bottom of this form, it's a one-page form, but it's just telling you local requirements. It's telling the sellers that they're supposed to have all new fixtures, especially if they did some kind of updates. And it's telling the buyers that if they ever did any updates, they have to use water conserving things. It's a form that we have to use. Nobody really puts any teeth into this to get buyers or sellers in trouble, except for the city of Dinuba. If any of you are ever selling a property in the city of Dinuba where they're going to use water from the city of Dinuba, what the city of Dinuba does, and I know that this happens in Santa Cruz too, but that's not here. What the city will do to the new buyers, when the new buyers go to turn on the water, they will not turn on the water if they don't have any records of the property being certified, for example, or being updated. So they pull up the address card and they say, okay, this property was turned on 6 months ago. We've already verified that it has water conserving plants, or fixtures. But let's say that it's a property that was 10 years since it's been changed in service. They will refuse to turn it on until a city inspector goes to the house, turns on all the water faucets, flushes all of the toilets and all of the shower heads. And if they deem that any of those are not water conserving fixtures, they will refuse to turn on the water until those items are changed out. And they do that in order to abide by California law and to have teeth in it. So can you imagine selling a property where the seller has already agreed that they're water conserving because they filled out this form and signed it, and the buyers think that it is? Who do you think the buyers are going to ask to pay for those water fixtures? To the seller. Now, if the seller disclosed, we've been in the home for 30 years, we don't think that it has water conserving devices, seller beware, buyer beware, buyer to verify. Now they have an out. But that is the only township or city that I'm aware of in the valley where we do most of our business that has become an issue. So again, there's things like that may not ever be an issue for you where you're doing business, but you need to be aware of it. And again, if you ever do business in Dinuba, just beware. The city's not going to turn on new water service for a new client until they look at the water conserving plumbing fixtures. So that's all. This is just a one-page form. It says it right at the bottom, page 1 of 1. I always go over that with the clients. I always go over the revision dates. The next one that I want to cover here with everybody, because a lot of this is kind of bland. A lot of this is not new, but you got to have an awareness of it, particularly for those of us that are in business for a while, because these forms are ever changing. Seller's affidavit and non-foreign status. Don't want to do that one. Statewide buyer and seller. This one's fun. This one's like ridiculous, in my opinion. This form, in my lifetime of being in real estate, has gone from where every page had a signature to where then they removed the signatures and went to an initial at the bottom of every page to where now is just the last page. And so it's been everywhere over the years, but this one was last revised June of 24. It's a statewide buyer and seller advisory. This form does not replace local condition disclosures or any other local advisories. I always have them, depending on who I'm representing. If it's the buyers, I have them read buyer's rights and duties. If I'm representing the seller, which is what we're pretending to do here, is you have them read the seller's rights and duties. And I really have them read it like out loud in front of me so I know that they read it, because it's going to give them an idea of what they're responsible for. So let me cover that with all of you. Seller's rights and duties. You have a duty to disclose material facts known to you that affect the value or desirability of the property. Second bullet point is you are obligated to make the property available to the buyer and have the utilities on for inspections as allowed by the agreement. And I always put an emphasis on that, because if you, the seller, are no longer living in the property, it could have been a rental property or you could have already moved out. The seller is responsible to have all the utilities on during the inspection period. And when is the final inspection done? Typically 5 days before the close of escrow. So I typically tell them you might as well keep the utilities on and the water on up until right the close of escrow. Because what you don't want to do is turn off all the utilities. For some reason it falls out, and then you have a week in the summer where nothing's gotten watered and your grass dies and all your plants start to die. So please keep them all on. The last bullet point for the seller to read is this form is not a substitute for completing the real estate transfer disclosure statement if required, and if any other property specific questionnaires or disclosures. So I just have them read that. It's a very quick 30-second read, and it just usually it prompts questions from the seller to me. And then I have them read, if they want to, my broker's rights and duties. I'm going to read them to you because I want you to know the word broker here references you as the agent. Also responsible to me because I got to oversee everything that you're doing, right? But let's go over what your responsibilities are. Brokers do not have expertise in all areas and matters affecting the property or your evaluation of it. For most sales of residential properties with no more than 4 units, brokers have a duty to make reasonably competent and diligent visual inspections of the accessible areas of the property and disclose to you material facts and defects that the inspection reveals, based again in our experience. Many defects and conditions may not be discoverable by a broker's visual inspection. If brokers give a referral to another professional, brokers do not guarantee that person's performance. You may select any professional of your own choosing. If somebody wants a home inspector, an air conditioning, a water well inspector, you don't give them one name. Even if all you know is one person that does it, you Google 2 or 3 more. You always try to give them a minimum of 2, preferably 3. 3 is like the magic number. If you give somebody 3 home inspectors, 3 water well inspectors, 3 plumbers, 3 air conditioning techs, now they chose who the hell they used. But if you only give them 2 and one doesn't answer, it could make you look bad. But again, you never want to give them just one. And then the next bullet point is if a broker gives you reports or other documents, unless otherwise specified, it is possible that different reports provided to you contain conflicting information. Broker has not and will not verify or otherwise investigate the information contained herein. So if we help the seller get a home inspection, a termite inspection, a HVAC inspection, and they're saying different things, that's for them to decide. You can help answer their questions and tell them where to go for some help, but we're not saying that one is right or the other one's wrong. It is, here's all the information. The last one is any written agreement between a broker and either the buyer or seller or both establishes the rights and responsibilities of those parties. This one's a little bit confusing, and it has to do a little bit with the fact that in California we can be dual agents. And so if we represent only the seller, then our responsibility lies with we have a fealty, we have a responsibility to our seller. If we're representing the buyer, then it's to our buyers. What the hell happens when you're representing both? How can you do the best job for both? And the answer is that you really can't, but you have to disclose that you're going to be fair and honest and transparent on both sides. And so that's just kind of that. So you got to be aware of that. Legal, tax, and contract considerations for both buyer and seller. This is a monster form. It's 15 pages. And as you go through all of this, here's page 1. Here's your table of contents on page 2. It's quite a bit. Here's the bottom of page 2. An investigation of physical conditions. You go over everything, environmental hazards. And what I usually tell the sellers or the buyers, depending on who I'm representing, is this is an advisory. Every single headline that you see is usually there because there was a lawsuit or potential lawsuit about it. So it's just basically giving you warning and disclosure that this is the stuff that you need to be aware of in a real estate transaction, such as environmental hazards, formaldehyde. Did you guys know that a lot of wooden floor or laminate floor, depending on how it's made, particularly like bamboo and some of the stuff that's been kind of compressed down, some of that stuff that's really popular, some of that has been treated with formaldehyde and it's emitting formaldehyde, the same thing that they use to put into people, like to dead people, like it can cause cancer. And like these tables that you're on, a lot of that pressed particle wood, some of that stuff contains formaldehyde. So it's emitting it depending as it breaks down and deteriorates over years. And so some of that stuff has been known to cause cancer. How many of you have a car that runs on gas? Almost everybody, right? That can cause cancer. How many of you have electric cars because you wanted to be the next phase? That can cause cancer. There's electromagnetic fields that could be potentially happening. Being alive can cause cancer, guys, but these are just disclosures. And there's geological hazards. So as you're going through all this is page 2. This is page 3. Then you go to page 4, page 5, and you finally have them read not all of them, but a few of the bullet points that you kind of pick out randomly. And then you go down to the bottom and you finally get to page 15. And we're going to go to page 15 and we're going to say, now that you've gotten to page 15, we have assumed that you have read and understand everything here. Please give me your signature. Have they read and understand everything there? The reality is that they probably haven't. And if you have an analytical customer that is going to want to review everything, the reality is you're going to have to leave the disclosures with them and give them time to read it and feel comfortable with it and then pick them up at a later time. Because a true analytical client that wants to be safe is not going to sign it without having read them. However, the other 80% of our customers will simply just sign it. And so you have to give the customers an opportunity to sign it. And if they don't feel comfortable signing it, you leave it with them and you pick it up later. They have to have the opportunity to read it. And anything that they sign in California, you have to provide them with a copy of some sort. So if you go back to your office and if this was done digitally, you can print up copies and give it to them, or acceptable in California also is to provide them a digital copy of it by email and confirm that they received it. And whether they print it or not is up to them, but they have to have a digital copy of it. If they don't get a copy of it from you, either a digital email copy or a physical copy, it could be deemed as a not enforceable contract because they never got copies of what they signed. So be aware of that. You have to provide them with some sort of copy of what they've signed. And again, it's most people now don't want paper copies. They want a digital copy that they can access at any time. So that is page 15. The other ones that I wanted to go over just really, really quickly is one that has not caused a lot of issues for us, but it's something that you need to be aware of. And wood burning heater, because this is going to go valley wide for us. So it's right in your zip forms. We've loaded it there for you. It's a wood burning heater statement of compliance. This is for anybody that's in San Joaquin County, Stanislaus, Merced, Madera, Fresno, Kings, Tulare, and the Valley Air Basin portion of Kern, which is most of the areas that we cover in Kern. Even if your property that you're selling does not have a fireplace, you still have to do this form and submit and say, hey, it doesn't have one. But if it does, you got to put it in there. And there are certain there are certain older wood burning fireplaces or stoves. They may have to be removed. And so you got to be aware of it. It should be covered, something that you're covering with your seller. And so it's something to be aware of, because if it's not certified, if it's not clean, they could have to remove it. And if the buyers really wanted it, they may want it replaced, right? And so it is one of those forms that is oftentimes missed, but it shouldn't be. It doesn't matter whether there is a chimney on the property or not. If it is a residential property, it should be done and it should be turned in. It's weird, I know, especially if the house has no fireplace, but it still should be done. And then the very last one I'm going to go over here, not that one, is this one here. Okay, here we go. This is a form that all of you should have in your zip forms. If not, get it from your manager and we can email it to them, but it should already be loaded into your templates. This is a company-wide one. It's only for a company. It's a real estate affiliated marketing disclosure, affiliated business arrangement disclosure. This is simply anybody who we have recommended agreements with, or they have a marketing agreements with us, anybody who has a reciprocal agreement with a company of any kind. So Core Home Loans is one of the lenders that we use quite a bit in Visalia. They pay us a marketing fee to come into our sales meetings. Bureau Mortgage is the other lender in Visalia that pays us a fee to come into our sales meetings. It's a marketing agreement fee. And so we are getting direct benefits as a company for allowing those two businesses to come in and represent. In Bakersfield, the Money Store has a marketing agreement with us and they pay us some kind of a fee to go into our sales meetings. Same with Signature Home Mortgage. The Mortgage Warehouse is somebody that we have had an agreement with in the past. And so we have to disclose that to any of our clients. Home Warranty of America, although we don't get a monetary benefit, sometimes they do sponsor some of our events, and that can be considered a benefit of monetary value. And so because of that, we have to disclose to our clients, all clients, that we have some kind of agreement with Home Warranty of America, which is the exact same thing we have with American Home Warranty. They don't pay us a monetary fee, but they do sponsor some of our events. Therefore, there's an advantage, there's some kind of a benefit to us. Upward Title Company. The Upward Title Company is a brand new title company that's being started by our parent company, which is Anywhere Real Estate, that owns Coldwell Banker, Century 21, and all those other franchises. And because of that, because they're owned subsidiary of them, and Mike and I have an interest in that because we're the franchisees and we invested in that, we get a benefit. They're not anywhere around here. They are going to open up. They have some in LA. They have some up north in Napa Valley area, and they're hoping to get one in Fresno soon. But if we ever start using them, there is a benefit because they're part of the franchise system. Property ID, same thing there. Sometimes they sponsor our events, so there's a benefit there. Same thing with Snap NHD. Homes for Rent it's a company that Mike, myself, and Gerardo own. Gerardo is Mike's original partner in Homes for Rent, and then I bought into that. So it is fully owned by the same ownership. And so because of that, they are an affiliated property management, and we have to disclose that to any of our customers, particularly if we're going to refer business to them. And then Fresno First Choice, although we have no ownership in it, one of our agents, broker agents affiliate, does in Fresno, and they're part of the ownership that we bought that company from in Fresno, or that office from. So there's a benefit there. And even though there's not a monetary benefit to us, they are part of the Fresno office and part of the family that we bought that business from. So that has to be disclosed. And so this is a form that all of you should have in your templates, and something that needs to be signed by everybody. And I'm just giving you full disclosure of how we're affiliated and what they do for us and what the benefits are to the company. And that should be signed by all of your clients at all times. So that's pretty much all that I had. Does anybody have any questions? You guys can unmute yourself if you guys want. I'll give you a full minute. That's it. You guys are awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Enjoy your lunch.